man who lives in my vents. The first time I heard him, it started with a whisper. Late at night, when the house was still, I would hear it, faint, almost imperceptible. A soft breath, a shuffling sound, coming from inside the vents. At first, I told myself it was just the house settling. Houses make noises, old pipes creak, air vents hum. But this wasn't that, because houses don't whisper your name. The scratching sounds. It got worse. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard scratching, faint at first, then more insistent. It came from the air vent above my bed. I stared at it, heart pounding. Then, tap, tap, tap. I bolted upright. Was something in there? A raccoon? A rat? I forced myself to be rational, but deep down I knew better, because animals don't laugh. The first glimpse. The next night, I decided to check. I climbed onto a chair, flashlight in hand, and unscrewed the vent cover. I hesitated. Then I shined the light inside. At first I saw nothing, just dust, metal, and darkness. But then, a face, pale, grinning, watching me. I screamed and fell backward, crashing onto the floor. By the time I scrambled to my feet, the face was gone. He's watching, I told my landlord. He laughed. Rodents, probably, he said. I'll send an exterminator. But the exterminator found nothing. No nests, no droppings. Are you sure it wasn't just your imagination? He asked. I nodded, pretending to agree. But I knew I wasn't imagining this. Because that night, I found a message, written in the dust inside the vent. 3 words, smeared by fingertips. He's watching you. The breathing in the walls, I started sleeping with the lights on, but that didn't stop him. At night, I could hear breathing inside the vents. Slow, deep, right above me. Like someone was lying just beyond the metal grates. Listening. Waiting. One night, I woke up to a cold breeze. The vent above my bed was open. The hand I stared in horror. Then something moved inside. A hand. Pale, bony fingers sliding out, reaching downward. I couldn't move. Then, the fingers curled, gripping the edge of the vent, getting ready to pull himself out. That broke me. I screamed and bolted from the room. I didn't stop running until I was outside, gasping in the freezing night air. I didn't go back inside until morning, and even then I wasn't alone. The hidden tunnel, I called a friend, Ethan. Together, we searched the vents. We took off every cover, shined lights inside. At first, there was nothing, but then Ethan found it. A hole, a small hidden opening in the main vent shaft, and beyond it, a crawl space, big enough for someone to live in. The room behind the walls I wanted to leave. Ethan wanted to go in. We need to know, he said, so we crawled through the opening. The space was tight, suffocating. The air stale, thick with dust and something else, something rotting. Then we saw it. A makeshift room, old blankets, empty food cans, and a notebook. The journal. We flipped through it, hands shaking. Inside were pages of notes, scrawled, erratic handwriting. Notes about me. He sleeps at 1:32 a.m. He talks in his sleep, says his mother's name. He never locks the bathroom window. My entire life was in those pages. I wanted to throw up. And then, at the very end, we found something worse. The last entry. Tomorrow. I finally introduced myself. He wasn't gone. We bolted, crawled out of the vents, ran straight to my landlord. He called the cops. They searched the crawl space, but he was gone. Only the notebook remained. And one last message, freshly scratched into the vent's metal lining. I'll come back. I moved, but he didn't. I moved out the next day. I left everything behind, but sometimes late at night I still hear it. A faint whisper, a soft scratching, and a quiet, distant laugh. Like he's still out there. Still watching, still waiting. For me to come back, or worse, for him to find me again. The ghost who sings a lullaby, a strange song in the night. It started with a melody, soft, haunting, floating through the night like a forgotten memory. I first heard it my second night in the house, a lullaby, a voice too sweet, too sad. I lived alone. So who was singing? The house on Briar Lane. The house was old, over 100 years, a Victorian-style home with creaky floors and shadows that moved when no one was looking. I should have questioned why it was so cheap. Why it sat empty for so long. Why the realtor avoided my calls after I moved in. The first night of the lullaby. The first night was peaceful. The second night, I heard it. A soft humming drifting through the halls. A lullaby, sung by a voice that was not mine. I checked my phone. Nothing was playing. I walked through the dark house following the sound. It grew clearer, closer. Then I realized It was coming from inside the nursery. But there was no nursery. I didn't have kids. There was no nursery. But when I opened the door at the end of the hall, there was a crib, rocking. A music box sat on the shelf, turning by itself, and the lullaby was still playing. The woman in white, I slammed the door and ran to my room. I locked it, pulled the covers over my head like a child hiding from the monsters in the dark. Then I heard footsteps, soft, barefoot, moving toward my door. I held my breath. Then a whisper. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." I didn't sleep. The house's tragic history. The next morning I started digging. I went to the local library, looked up old records, then I found it. A woman named Eleanor Gray. She had lived in my house in the early 1900s, a young mother. Her husband died in the war, leaving her alone with their infant son. One winter night, her baby stopped breathing. She lost her mind. Neighbors reported hearing her singing to the empty crib for weeks. Then one day, she vanished. No body, no farewell. Just a rocking crib in an empty house. The crib that rocked by itself. That night I heard it again, the lullaby. This time, I didn't hide. I walked toward the nursery, my hands shaking. The crib was rocking. A shadow stood over it. A woman in a long white gown, hair hanging in tangled strands, face pale as the moonlight. She turned, and her eyes met mine. "He's sleeping now." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her lips parted. "Shh," she whispered. "He's finally sleeping." She gestured to the crib. It was empty, yet the blanket was moving, like something was still breathing underneath. "She's still here." I ran, packed my bags, left the house that night. But I swear, as I drove away, I saw her standing in the window, rocking the crib, still singing that lullaby. And in the wind, I could hear it. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." The secret room in my house, a house with a history. When I bought the house, I thought I was getting a great deal, a large Victorian home in a quiet neighborhood. It needed work, but I didn't mind. I wanted a fresh start, but some houses don't want new owners. Some houses have secrets they refuse to let go of, and I was about to discover one. The blueprint that didn't match. I found it by accident. A few weeks after moving in, I was going through old blueprints in the attic, and that's when I saw it. A room that didn't exist, or at least it wasn't supposed to. The blueprint showed an extra space between the bedroom and the hallway, a hidden room. But when I checked the wall, where it should have been was nothing but solid plaster. No door, no entrance, nothing at all. The hollow wall curiosity took over. I knocked on the wall, and it sounded hollow. Something was behind it. I grabbed a hammer, started tearing away the plaster. Bit by bit, the wall crumbled. And then I found it, a wooden door, old, faded, with scratches all over the surface. Deep, desperate scratches, like someone had been trapped inside. The room no one spoke of. I hesitated. Something felt wrong, like the air was too thick, too still. But I had come this far, so I grabbed the handle and pulled it open. The smell hit me first, rotting wood, old dust, something else too, something worse. The room was small, empty, except for a chair in the center. And the chains bolted to the floor. The chain in the floor, I stepped inside. The air was ice cold. The walls were covered in faded writing. Desperate, hurried words scratched into the paint. "Let me out. He's coming." No more singing. And then, in the center of the floor, a rusted chain. Attached to it was a small, broken cuff. Too small for an adult, too small for me. The whisper in the dark, that's when I heard it. A whisper, right behind me. "You found it." I turned. No one was there, but the door was closing. I lunged forward, grabbing the handle just in time. The moment I stepped out, the whisper came again. This time a giggle, soft, childlike. Then the door slammed shut, on its own. The house's darkest secret. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I searched for answers. I found an old newspaper article from the 1930s. A family had lived here. A man, his wife, their daughter. She had been kept in a room, a secret room. Neighbors reported hearing her singing at night, soft, faint, until one day, she stopped. She's still here. The next night, I heard it. The singing, soft, faint, coming from inside the wall. I covered it with furniture. I sealed the door, but every night she still sings, and sometimes she whispers my name.